Now we're going to jump shift, if you will, or jump cut if you're in films. You might wonder what these boxing gloves are doing on the table and up here. Well, Bud has not only spent his life doing many other things, but his hobby, boxing. Wrote The Harder They Fall, one of the great boxing books - movies of all time. Is still at every fight covering it. I mean, it's always been my pleasure to sit with him and trade stories to the wee hours of the morning. And I would like to have a couple gentlemen, and we'll start with one of them, just say something about Bud's association with the sweet science which he's made all the sweeter. The first gentle person is the former head of the Pennsylvania State Athletic Commission, a world-known trial attorney, an officer of one of the leading sanctioning organizations, and a person whose presence is felt at every major fight. This man knows Bud and knows boxing and knows the association, and I'd like to introduce Mr. James J. Binns, better known as Jimmy Binns. Jimmy.
Thank you, Bert. You've already heard about Betsy and Kathy and the work that they've done in connection with tonight's dinner, and I'd like at this time to acknowledge the participation of two other ladies, Emily Schell and Daniel Pacheco, with Changing Our World, who worked tirelessly to make this a big success that it is tonight. Emily and Danielle, would you stand up and be recognized, please? If Bud Schulberg had chosen to be a prize fighter, he would have been a world champion. He's cut from the same mold as the great Benny Leonard and Lou Tendler and Benny Bass and Barney Ross, the great fighters of the 30s and 40s. And how do we know this? Because Bud has demonstrated his courage, his intrepidation, and what we call in the boxing business, his gigantic heart. And he first demonstrated this while a student at Dartmouth College, where he published the school newspaper. And he took the side of the Marble Workers Union against the giant quarry owners. And he prevailed. But he did so much at his own personal risk as a student, because he took on, in fact, the entire alumni of Dartmouth College. And it was only 5 years later that he took on the Hollywood establishment when he published the first of his magna opera, his beloved Sammy. And his courage is self-evident when you realize that the entire establishment came down on him like thunder. And they didn't ever expect that work to receive the recognition that it did from the likes of F. Scott Fitzgerald, Dorothy Parker, John O'Hara, Walter Winchell, and Damon Runyon. But nonetheless, he vanquished the establishment, and only 7 years later moved on to defend his second great love, the world of boxing, when he published The Harder They Fall, which was a terrific expose on corruption of the sport of his beloved boxing, which at that time was referred to as by Jimmy Cannon as the slum of the sports world. But to Bud, it was show business with blood, as he liked to refer to it. And he took on Frankie Carbo and Blinky Palermo, two mobsters who portrayed themselves as boxing commissioners without portfolio. And it was after a fight that Bud witnessed in Philadelphia between Johnny Saxton and Gil Turner that he wrote an epic expose which was published by Sports Illustrated and then rerun in the New York Herald Tribune, entitled "Boxing Must Clean Up Its Dirty Business Now," for which, once again, he took on the mob establishment and was banned from Madison Square Garden, his beloved mecca of boxing. But nonetheless, it was shortly after Bud's exposés that Messrs. Carbo and Palermo were given cells in penitentiaries, and boxing has benefited ever since from Bud's work. And having vanquished the quarry moguls and the Hollywood establishment and the fight mob, he then took on the Waterfront mob with his epic film, which you'll see later, where he sided with the longshoremen against the racketeers who were very dangerous at the time, Tough Tony Anastasia and his brother Albert, who happened to be the chairman of Murder Incorporated. And so Bud consistently, through the 6 decades of his productive writing life, has always championed the cause of the underdog and cried out against what he refers to as Neanderthalism, which he defines as social cruelty and stupidity. And so, Bud, for my birthday wish to you, I would like to reshoot that epic scene in the back seat of the car and replace, with great respect, Marlon Brando with you, and have Charlie turn to you and say, Bud, you are a contender. You got class, kid, real class. You are somebody. And kid, tonight it is your night. And so for the next 90 years, I wish that you will be as productive and satisfied as you have made us for the first 90 years, entertained and educated. May God bless you, and happy birthday.
That was beautiful, Jimmy. As a trial lawyer, I tell you I acquit, and I don't know what the hell we acquit from. I've got a second person in the audience, a very long-time boxing presence, a man who has spent, and it's interesting to note, this is the week of the 30th anniversary of the Rumble in the Jungle, spent many of the great fights of Muhammad Ali in the corner of Ali. The man known as the Fight Doctor, a writer, an artist, a commentator for Showtime, and one of the great presence, one of the great characters, one of the great names in boxing. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Ferdy Pacheco. It's nice to get some company here with a hat. Where in the dickens is he? Come on, Ferdy Pacheco.
Before, and I'm going to be here for a little while. I need a glass of water because I've had a stroke 2 years ago. I've recovered, as you can see. However, the resume,
It's a 3-minute round.
the residue of that is an unfortunate thing in that the center of inhibition has been damaged, so that when I get to an emotional part, it looks like I'm going to cry. I'm not crying. Don't get excited about that, because I cry just saying Benz's, see, that's what I mean. Benz's speech is the best thing I've heard in years, best thing I've heard him say in his life.